The shadows grow long, the air turns cold, and you feel a shiver crawl down your spine. It's the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. Tonight we delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche, the places where fear takes root and nightmares come to life. These are the stories that keep you up at night, the ones that make you double-check the locks and sleep with the lights on. Are you brave enough to face the darkness? Then gather close, turn down the lights, and prepare to be terrified by 3 true scary stories that will stay with you long after the video ends. Deep in the isolated backwoods of Maine, nestled amongst towering pines and shrouded in an eerie silence, stood a dilapidated cabin. It had been abandoned for decades, its wooden walls rotting, windows boarded shut, and a rusty axe resting against the porch swing, untouched by time. This was no ordinary cabin. Locals whispered tales of its dark past, of a family brutally murdered within its walls, their souls forever trapped. One crisp autumn evening, a group of friends, eager for adventure and oblivious to the cabin's sinister history, decided to spend the night. They were young, filled with a sense of invincibility that only youth could provide. There was Emily, the skeptic, Jake, the jokester, Sophia, the sensitive one, and Ryan, the leader. As the sun began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows across the clearing, the friends unloaded their car, their laughter echoing through the stillness of the woods. They built a bonfire, the flames casting a warm glow against the encroaching darkness, and shared stories, each one raising goosebumps on their arms despite the fire's warmth. Nightfall arrived, blanketing the forest in an oppressive darkness, and the friends retreated inside the cabin. The air inside was heavy, thick with the stench of decay and the weight of unseen eyes. A chill ran down Emily's spine as she ran her fingers across the dusty furniture, a sense of dread settling in the pit of her stomach. Hours passed. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the walls as the friends told ghost stories, their laughter a feeble attempt to mask their growing unease. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. Sophia, her eyes wide with terror, pointed a trembling finger towards the corner of the room. "I saw something," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The others exchanged uneasy glances. Jake, ever the skeptic, dismissed it as a figment of her imagination. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. The temperature in the room plummeted, a bone-chilling cold seeping into their bones. The fire sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness. Then the noises began. Soft whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, surrounding them, growing louder, more insistent. A cold wind whipped through the cabin, slamming doors shut, rattling windows in their frames. The rusty axe, untouched all these years, clattered to the floor, its metallic clang echoing through the cabin like a death knell. Panic surged through the group. They huddled together, their eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the terrifying sounds. Lost in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains lies a place known only as the Whispering Woods. Locals speak of it in hushed tones, warning hikers to stay clear, their voices filled with a mixture of fear and reverence. Legend has it that the woods are haunted by the spirits of those who perished within its tangled embrace, their tormented whispers forever echoing through the trees. One foggy morning, a lone hiker named Daniel found himself drawn to the wood's edge. An experienced outdoorsman, he scoffed at the local tales, dismissing them as mere superstition. Armed with his compass and a sense of adventure, he ventured into the woods, the fog closing in behind him like a shroud. The deeper he walked, the denser the forest became, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy above, casting the woods in a perpetual twilight. Daniel checked his compass, but the needle spun erratically, sending him in circles. As the day wore on, a strange unease crept over him. The forest seemed to press in on him, the trees closing ranks, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own footsteps and the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. And then he heard it. A faint whisper, carried on the wind, seemed to come from the trees themselves. He stopped, holding his breath, straining to hear. There it was again, a soft, mournful sigh, barely audible above the rustling leaves. He pressed on, his unease growing with every step. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, surrounding him, seeming to come from all directions at once. They spoke his name, their voices cold, filled with an ancient sorrow that chilled him to the bone. Fear gnawed at the edges of his mind. He quickened his pace, his heart pounding in his chest, desperate to escape the suffocating darkness of the woods. But the whispers followed him, their voices growing louder, more menacing. He stumbled upon a clearing in the center of which stood a towering oak, its branches gnarled and twisted like the limbs of a tormented soul. As he approached the tree, the whispers reached a fever pitch, their voices coalescing into a single bone-chilling scream. He spun around, searching for the source of the terrifying sound, but there was nothing there, and then he saw it. The city streets were slick with rain, the neon lights reflecting off the asphalt, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that did little to pierce the oppressive darkness. It was the witching hour, that time when the veil between the living and the dead thinned, and the city held its breath, bracing itself for the unknown. Thomas, a seasoned taxi driver with a gruff exterior and a heart of gold, navigated the desolate streets, his only companions the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers and the faint hum of the radio. He had seen it all during his years behind the wheel, joy, sorrow, desperation. But tonight, something felt different. The air thick with an unseen energy that sent shivers down his spine. A figure emerged from the shadows, their silhouette barely visible in the pouring rain. Thomas pulled over, his headlights illuminating a young woman, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. She wore a simple white dress, soaked through, clinging to her slender frame. "Where to?" Thomas asked, his voice gruff but kind. The woman hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "Grandview Cemetery, please." It was an unusual request, especially at this hour, but Thomas, a firm believer in minding his own business, simply nodded and pulled back into traffic. As they drove, the woman sat silently in the back, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, or rather, the lack thereof. The silence in the cab was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. Thomas tried to make small talk, but the woman's responses were short, distant, as if her mind was a million miles away. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her reflection. Her eyes, now dry and hollow, seemed to stare right through him, sending a shiver down his spine. He quickly averted his gaze, focusing on the road ahead, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. As they approached the cemetery gates, the rain intensified, transforming the world outside into a blurry, impressionistic painting. Thomas pulled up to the entrance, a sense of unease settling in the pit of his stomach. He turned to tell the woman they had arrived, but the back seat was empty. He blinked, his heart pounding in his chest. Had he imagined the whole thing? He was reaching for the door handle when he heard it, a soft, mournful sigh coming from the back seat. He spun around, his eyes wide with terror, to see the woman's translucent form hovering in the back seat, her features twisted in a grimace of pain and anger. Her voice, cold and hollow, echoed through the cab, sending chills down his spine. "They left me there," she whispered, her voice filled with a bone-chilling rage. "Left me to die." Thomas, paralyzed with fear, could only watch as the ghostly figure reached out, her icy fingers brushing against his cheek, leaving a trail of frost in their wake. So there you have it. 3 terrifying tales that prove the line between our world and the realm of the supernatural is thin indeed. Maybe you relate to the terror of the friends in the cabin, or perhaps you feel the hiker's fear as the whispers surrounded him. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice before picking up any strangers on a dark and stormy night. Until next time, sleep tight, and for your own sake, I hope you don't hear any whispers from the shadows tonight.